Hello and welcome to the Silk and Steel podcast once again. I'm your host, Carl Zha. Today we have a returning guest, TP Huang, who is an expert in anything China technology related, but is also an expert in Chinese military. For my audience who's not familiar with you, TP, could you do a very quick, brief intro of who you are, what you do, etc.?
Yeah, so I actually started just on the military side of things. I started following Chinese military back in mid 2000s, and then I joined a Chinese military forum called Sino Defense Forum, and I've been like a super moderator there ever since. So I've been spending the good part of 20 years just studying Chinese weapon systems and the technology behind it. So this is a topic I'm really very fascinated about.
Oh, this is a topic we're all very fascinated about, especially, I'm sure, after the result of the China's victory parade that just took place a few days ago. And this is why I brought you here, TP, because China has showcased a lot of new weapon platforms. I think it surprised many. And I need I need your help to help us break it down and what we're seeing here.
Sure, like I think they showcased quite a few systems, but it's such like a broad category. I think it's probably better if we just go through category by category and just talk about the significance of each of them.
Okay, let's go. Which category would you like to start?
So I think the one that's like really struck people's attention to start off are the missiles, right? Because the hypersonic missile has been one of their strong areas that everyone knows about for a while now. And this particular parade, they showcased four like YJ missiles that we really haven't seen before: the YJ-15, YJ-17, YJ-19, and YJ-20. And they also showed off some of the hypersonic missiles we already know about, like DF-17 and a new variant of DF-26 called DF-26D. And there was also this new hypersonic land-based cruise missile called CJ-1000. So overall, it kind of just like showcased a really wide um, set of options that they have to deliver a payload and warhead to, I guess, anything within 3,000 kilometers, and some of those weapons can go even a lot further than that. So it's definitely a very, I guess, very terrifying prospect for like some of their adversaries in the region. So, um, so I think like there's a few that was really interesting to us. Like one was the YJ-19, because they made it in such a size that it can fit into the torpedo tubes. And that is really quite interesting because there's a lot of complexity involved in getting the missile to such a dimension that it can fit in the torpedo tube, um, especially something that can fly at a hypersonic speed of like Mach 6 to Mach 8. That's what some of the Chinese social media account is saying. And the implication of that is quite huge because you could have some of these submarines uh, sail out to the ocean, and the diesel submarines are relatively hard to detect uh, in the middle of the ocean when they're not moving, and they can essentially just sit there from different angles, and then once they somehow they get the coordination of where they need to attack, then launch these missiles through their, their torpedo tubes, and um, and it's going to be very hard to defend depending on how far you are, because um, the thing about hypersonic cruise missiles is that it can go at once they get to like hypersonic speed, it can stay at that speed for quite a long time, like all the way to the end. and it doesn't fly as high up the horizon as a ballistic missile, so it's a little bit harder to detect. And because the terminal speed is still very fast, so it's very hard to intercept. So this just gives them like another option. And then we also saw the what we call the hypersonic glide vehicles that are uh, designed to fit the VLS, so the universal vertical launch system on the destroyers. And that's kind of interesting because uh, they they're estimated to be able to go like 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers. Maybe that's a little high, but like somewhere in that ballpark. And they probably have pretty high speed in the middle part of it, and maybe a little slower to the end. And the HGVs are pretty hard to intercept also. And if you can actually pack like so I think the other missiles that was kind of interesting is like the DF-17 and DF-20, and they're kind of interesting because they can have relatively long range of 1,500 kilometers or a little more, and also they are going at hypersonic speed, and they don't follow the ballistic missile pass, which goes pretty high up, and their ballistic missiles are a little easier to detect. The HGVs are a little less easy to detect and intercept than the HGVs. And so it's kind of consequential when you can have these in your destroyers, because something like the 055 has 112 tubes. And if you load like 20, 30 of these HGVs and they can hit targets from 1,500 kilometer out, that's a lot of firepower. And aside from that, they also have this thing called YJ-15, which is an evolution of YJ-12. So what they did is they took an existing missile that was probably had like 400 to 500 kilometer range and can go at probably 3 times the speed of sound, and they made it a little more compact, smaller. They made its warhead a little smaller, and they improved the technology behind it. So now it can go like maybe, faster than Mach 3, and it can go probably, 500 kilometers again. But now you can carry them on your J-15s. So then, on your carrier group, your J-15s can carry 2 of them each, or maybe even 4 of them, and then fly off and then shoot missiles that are probably faster than, pretty much what any other naval like aviation force have access to. So like that. So if you can shoot something faster than Mach 3, it's actually really hard to defend, because they're not used to seeing, supersonic missiles go that fast normally. And so they're also pretty lethal. So basically, what they have is they have the aerial launched really high supersonic. They have uh, the naval surface ship launched hypersonic missile, and then they also have the submarine launched hypersonic missile. So that just makes it a lot harder for defenders to defend, because now you're facing different missiles from different directions, flying different profiles, which is a lot harder than if you're just dealing with the fastest missile, but it's only coming from one direction and only flying one profile. So
The hypersonic cruise
yeah,
missile, is that new? Because my understanding, cruise missile usually they usually don't fly that fast, right? They fly like the speed of the airplanes. Is this something that unique to China, or is this do other countries possess them as well?
I'm not aware of any other country with hypersonic cruise missiles in
Mm.
production that you can put on the ships themselves. Like the hypersonic missiles itself is pretty much not something that other navies have access to. So I think this is actually pretty unique to China. Like some of the other military around the world, they have land-based launchers of hypersonic missiles, and they're typically not cruise missiles, I think. So some of them are just ballistic missiles, and other ones are, I think there are some HGVs, but hypersonic cruise missiles that can go for like a good distance, that's pretty rare.
And I also want
So
to go back to a basics a little bit. Like, it's my understanding, even regular ballistic missile at the end of its trajectory, it reaches hypersonic speed. So what distinguish a hypersonic missile versus a normal ballistic missile?
so I think the hypersonic missiles, it's the CCTV actually had a recent definition for hypersonic missiles, and it's basically something that can go the whole way above Mach 5, and it also needs to be able to do maneuvers and is relatively, accurate, able to hit targets. Like if you look at ballistic missiles, right? They fly the ballistic path, and most of the time it has like, I guess, an apex speed at the top, and then slows down as it comes down a little bit. So sometimes even if it's goes faster than Mach 6 or 7 at some point, it could still slow down by the end depending on like how long range ballistic missile it is. But more importantly, it is just not able to do the same kind of maneuvers against targets, and it's CEP, basically CEP just measures how accurate the missile is against target. It's just not going to be at the same level as a what we call a hypersonic
Right. So
missile.
ballistic missiles, their trajectory is fixed. Once they're fired, we can calculate where it's going to land. Whereas hypersonic missile, they can actually alter their flight path. Right. Once they take flight. And
And not only can they alter flight paths, they can, I think part of it is that they're able to maneuver in such a way that it gets them closer and more accurate to the target. Because some of the ballistic missiles, some of the intercontinental ballistic missiles, and some of the other ballistic missiles can also maneuver, but um, I don't. We wouldn't normally consider them to be hypersonic missiles because don't they don't have the same accuracy when it comes to attacking the end
now, these
targets.
missile, how are you saying they were able to readjust their flight path, to correct for the target? Like, does that mean like they're somehow linked to maybe satellite intelligence to make themselves correct their path and focus to zoom on the target?
I think most of them do have the ability to get updates from satellites. I'm not really sure the process behind the mid-course guidance correction. I do think that, especially with something like cruise missiles, it can change paths uh, a lot more than your ballistic missiles. And HGV, because it's kind of like just glides at a certain altitude, it can also maneuver a little better than your and are more accurate than your usual ballistic missiles. But there are some ballistic missiles that they have in service, which are also, I guess, considered to be hypersonic missiles because, like the DF-26, because they're pretty much they are, I guess at least they're considered to be in the same category just because they're considered to be pretty accurate against the end target. So the definition gets a little murky. Generally speaking, I think the hypersonic missiles, regardless of the definitions, and some of that, maybe I'm a little more liberal about the including some of the ballistic missiles in there, like the DF-26, but as a whole, they generally pose a big threat to the defense. The CJ-1000, that's not something we've seen before, and it is a pretty big missile, and it probably has something close to like a 3,000-kilometer range, and it's a hypersonic cruise missile, so um, it can get to the target pretty quickly. It gives them another profile, another option against, let's say, like a naval ship from Japan or U.S. that are inside the second island chain. And everyone's heard about the DF-17 and 26. So those are the ones that the Western analysts know a lot about. So this parade was kind of scary for some of the people because it just introduced a whole new selection of weapons that they have to think about.
Which one is what the Western defense analysts call the Guam killer? Guam is the U.S. military base in Pacific.
They typically think of the DF-26 because it has like about a 4,000 kilometer range. Although they have a new version DF-26D, that one probably has like a 5,000 kilometer range, so it can probably hit Australia, the Northern Australia, and also
but
Alaska.
why call it Guam killer? Because China possessed ICBM before, right? I mean, like China had ICBM since 1981. What makes this DF-26 special?
So like in the actual combat, in actual conflict, ideally we'll never get to a situation where we have to get to nuclear missiles, because once you start launching like intercontinental missiles, the other side, there's a good chance the other side thinks that a nuclear weapon is coming over. So that's kind of dangerous. So like there needs to be clear delineation of like which missiles are nuclear tips and which ones are not. And there's definitely within the PLA rocket force, there's ones that handle nuclear payload, and there's ones that do not. So in terms of Guam, why Guam itself is important is because it's basically it was at least considered to be the center of U.S.'s defense against Chinese pressure in the West Pacifics, because it's a little further away from the China's mainland. It's like 2,800 kilometer, I think, from the coast, maybe around there. And so some of the missiles that they had before, like DF-17 and DF-16, can't really reach there, and a lot of their earlier cruise missiles just can't go that far. So they had to develop a new series of both ballistic and cruise missiles that can go that far. And something like the H6K with launching cruise missile was part of their arsenal, their plans to be able to deliver enough ammunition and warheads against the Guam base. So that was why Guam was always considered to be very important, and that's also why America started to invest in building military facilities in Northern Australia, in Darwin, because it's even a little bit further away from China than Guam is, and they're able to expand on the airfields and the naval bases there. So like America was trying to find places they can operate at are about 3,000 kilometers from China's mainland. So that's why DF-726, when they have the 4,000 kilometer range missile, was in large part to deal with this threat.
Got it. And just the buildup of the spaces on Guam, this started back in Bush years. Donald Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld's idea was to pull back from deployed U.S. Military bases in Korea and Okinawa, and to build up this giant base in Guam that's slightly just out of reach of China, but U.S. will still be able to base attack on Chinese target from there. So now that's they have to go back to the drawing board. The Guam is considered, I think, what the U.S. calls as the second island chain, and the Chinese aircraft carrier groups have already demonstrated they could reach around the waters around Guam in the recent exercises. And do you think this recent Chinese parade had a impact in that leaked Pentagon reports, where a Pentagon plan where Pete Hegseth said we're gonna focus less on contain China and more on our more on the homeland, more on U.S. and Latin America?
I think it's been known for a while to the people in the U.S. intelligence that it's basically they're doomed in a Westpac scenario for a lot of reasons, right? Like America is not very focused on Asia, despite the so-called Asia pivot and the Guam buildup, and they wanted to build up other field in the area like the Mariana Islands, I think, Tinian. There's a couple other ones they wanted to build up, but as you can imagine, there's not a lot of people that live in these places. So trying to build bases in places that during peacetime, in like these environments where it takes a lot of effort to actually ship the equipment over and actually do construction. America can't build bases in America. Like building bases halfway across the world is pretty hard for America, right? So because of that, all their efforts basically got concentrated on Guam. And I think that in general, um, it was known like pretty obvious to the U.S. intelligence after a while that the pace of China's missile buildup was far outstripping their ability to defend these bases. And also, America can't really concentrate on one theater, so he expended like all these missiles, air defense missiles in Ukraine and Israel, right? So when you get someone ideologically driven to kneel lips like Joe Biden in power, right? Like he has to continue to tell the world like authoritarian democracies versus autocracies, whereas you get like a more of like I guess a realist kind of people into Defense Department. They might hate China, but they're at least looking at the situation. It's like this is not going well for us here, so we may need to like pull back on things a little bit.
Well, I,
So I think they know a lot of these weapons before the parade already. It's just like, when they came in, they're like, this is a losing proposition for us.
that makes sense. But I do remember they did develop a try to develop a doctrine where they're going to build mobile launchers where the U.S. will be able to quickly deploy their missile launching force in one island, fire a Chinese target, and then evacuate and move to a different spot so they don't get hit. I mean, like, do you think that was even realistic?
On paper, but in reality, it's actually really hard to get the support for like fifth generation fighter jet and like advanced bombers in these airfields, right? Because you need certain kind of jet fuel, you need certain kind of maintenance stuff. You can't just land an F-35 and expect it to fly again. You need to do work on it. So there's always this mystery that people are wondering, why do they just think you can just do this like none of the support is required? And I mean that I think like the people that came up with the plans, they were definitely hoping for the best, but there's some reality checks to be concerned about. And to be honest, I think it made sense for them to originally plan to build out airfields that are protected in places like Tinian and Northern Mariana Islands, but you know the progress on those is very lacking.
Right. I mean, it seems like they're still fighting the last Pacific War, right? They still think it's going to be a replay of World War II, but the whole power balance have shifted. I said many times, if they think it's going to be a replay of Pacific War, it's gonna be the role will be reversed. China will be in the role of United States in 1941, and U.S. will be in the role of Empire of Japan because that's how much the manufacturing power have shifted to the east. Okay, so can we can move on from the missile part?
Yeah, I think the missile part is only part of it. I think the unmanned platforms were some of the most interesting stuff that we saw on the parade. If you want, I can talk about both the aircraft and also the submarines that we saw.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I think the drones, the large drones that we saw, really surprised me personally quite a bit, just because I actually had no idea they were that advanced. Like I knew they had some stuff planned, but I didn't know if they were that particularly advanced. We saw like basically two large drones that were somewhat comparable in size to a J-10, which is larger than any of the drones that are in development with the U.S. Air Force. So U.S. Air Force has what they call the Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program, which are basically drones that are much larger than your FPVs that are intended to fly with your fifth or sixth generation aircraft as what they call the loyal wingman. So you have the manned aircraft directing the unmanned aircraft to do whatever. And what we saw China display was they showcase some smaller drones that probably played a similar role to what American envisioned the loyal wingman to look like. And then we saw these two large drones, which are J-10 sized, and we know based on the layout that they can probably fly supersonic speed, and it is not out of the question that they can do supersonic cruise. And they can also have these like tailless ends. So, it's very stealthy, clearly, because they're just shaped that way. And basically, I would say they're built to like higher stealth standard than J-35 even. So in reality they should be very hard to detect, and they're built in a way that indicates that they can maneuver very quickly. So the thing about humans is like we have bodies. So if the turn goes too fast, then we might faint. So there are real limits on like how much the drones can turn when not drones aircraft can turn when humans are in them, right? You don't really have the same limitations when there's no person in them. So a lot of these like drones that we saw, hypothetically speaking, they can turn at much more aggressive turn rates than the fighter jet that we're used to see. And they're clearly very large, and they're intended to be able to be controlled by the manned fighters. So if you think about it, if you have like a J-20 at the near a little closer to the back, you might want to have like some unmanned fighter in the front. That's that's a little more maneuverable. So or just pretty maneuverable. So when it encounters like a adversary F-35, it can engage that aircraft in combat and forces that aircraft to use a lot of energy to fight it, so and expose itself, so that like a lot of this stuff is still hypothetical because the PLA itself right now is probably actively testing out these drones to see the best way to use them. So everything I say is just a hypothetical, and I'm sure it will turn entirely different than what I actually speculate. But the idea is it gives you a lot of options out there in how it can affect the battlefield, and nobody else is even developing these things at the moment.
So you're saying that
So
these drones, their role is to be fighters. They're fighter drones.
yeah, so we first saw like a trace of this in 2013 when there was a model called Dark Sword, or in Chinese 暗箭, and it was kind of surprising at the time because we hadn't that was the first time we saw like a more like a fighter jet concept kind of drone, and it had canards on the side, and it had a layout that would indicate that it can do supersonic speeds, and it was looked quite stealthy. But the ones that we saw like this in the parade was even stealthier because they don't have the tail and they don't have the canards or anything. It looks very very advanced. But yeah, like we first saw that concept back in 2013. We just didn't hear anything more about this topic until recently when we saw two of them, and they already have serial numbers. So evidently they're being tested somewhere, most likely in the somewhere in Xinjiang. So it's way away from the Western intelligence. You can only see them probably through satellites. And my guess is the PLA is using them to see how best to develop doctrines on how best to use them in combat at the moment. And they also just have the J-20S, so the two-seater version of the J-20 go into service. And when you have two-seater aircraft, it gives you like a second operator whose job is concentrate on controlling these drones to fully utilize them. So you have an aircraft and you have drones that you can develop tactics with now.
This is like the Macross stuff, I remember 20 years ago. I back in college, I watched the anime Macross Plus, and that was with the drone fighters fighting the human fighters. I mean, like, looks like that's going to be reality in like next few years.
It's already happening in PLA exercises actually. According to one of the podcasts that talks about these things, they're saying that you're already having cases where the unmanned drones are scoring hits against fighter jets.
Wow. We're really moving quickly here. Like, this is the kind of thing I thought was sci-fi 25 years ago.
Like, I don't know how much of that is hyperbole, but like what the scenarios in which they did this under. But it was really surprising to me when I heard about this, because the first concept was they're moving way faster on this than I expected, and the technology behind this is probably moving faster than what a lot of people have anticipated by this point, because people up to this point aren't really expecting the drones that they're controlling to be fighter jets itself, right? Like, we're expecting the drones to maybe attack some ground targets or go after some easier target in the air, and they're just there as like a bomb truck. They're there to just launch the missile, and if they get spotted and get shot down, it's no big deal. But the PLA is moving like they're like, we have so many aerospace engineers, we're gonna do those stupid drones, and we're gonna do these super drones that are just awesome, and then we're gonna test these out in our ranges with our huge swaths of engineers until we get this right, and then you can't mess with us.
That reminds me that they recently launched a new amphibious assault ship, Sichuan, right? And that Sichuan looks like it's designed to be a drone launching platform, no?
Yeah, so we actually also saw the aircraft design for that. It's called GJ-21. So in the 2019 parade, they had what they displayed, something they called GJ-11, which was more designed for the Air Force. So this GJ-21 is actually designed more for the the 076 to start off, and it's kind of interesting because they're just expecting this, which is extremely stealthy. Like, if you look at it, it's what we call fly-wing design, and it can fly to the target, drop the bombs, and against most adversaries, I would imagine it's very hard for them to detect something this stealthy and do the attacks and then fly back. So Yeah, so they and it looks like that is also being tested out, being evaluated. They're also figuring out how to use it because when you have both types 076 and you have your carrier groups, they have different missions, obviously, but how you want to utilize these assets, I think the PLA is going to have to take some time to figure out because they have a lot of toys, so they need to figure out how to use them. But what I want to point out is that at current time, the Chinese Air Force right now have at least two sixth generation fighter jets. They have probably 5 or 6 advanced drone concepts that they're actively flying and testing out, whereas the U.S. Air Force has one project that's a fighter, and they have 2 drone projects which are not as impressive. And so this just shows you, like, the engineering differences between what the U.S. has access to and what China has access to.
Is that just a matter of numbers? Like China just have more engineers, or China just devoted more funding to this, or actually no, U.S. has way more. U.S. defense budget is way larger, but it's Chinese. It seems Chinese funding defense budget is a lot more efficiently deployed, right?
Yeah, so when J35A came out, like late last year, one thing that they mentioned was that the average age of the core engineering team for the project was like 33.
Wow.
So it's a very young and very energized engineering team. Whereas if you look at the U.S. aerospace industry, right, um, the last major project that Boeing did of any kind was 787. That's the last major new project it did. Um, it hasn't really done a major fighter jet project for a long time. So just in terms of like people that have experience in designing and developing new aircraft, you know, the Chinese aerospace industry is way ahead on that one, which is kind of surprising when you consider, like, this is probably the one area where China should be nominally be behind America because, America does have Boeing, and the China's commercial aviation project isn't as far along, but because it has had these like development teams that's been working on J10 and flankers for like 20, 30 years, and then they moved on to J20 and J35A. So it's pretty clear that they have a pretty good pipeline in training the next generation of engineers, and these engineers are now developing a lot of really advanced designs.
Now, what do you have to say to the claim that, oh, Chinese, they just copy, they just stole the American designs, they just copied everything.
I mean, you can't really look at the two humongous drones that they have and say that they copied anyone, because there's those concepts are just not anywhere else to be found in this world right now. And if you look at the J36, it's a very innovative design. Let's put it that way. Nobody's thinking about doing 3 engines with 2 on the side and 1 on the top, right? So it's they're definitely they're definitely pushing the boundaries with a lot of new designs, and they have a lot of engineers, and the supply chain is quite impressive. Like, a lot of it really reminds me of just generally China's any other industry, where they, slowly build up the supply chain, and once they build up the supply chain, and they have this huge pool of engineers, they can just iterate through processes like much faster than anyone else. So, like, this, if people want us to talk about deep seek moment for the military industrial complex, this should be it, because nobody's expecting to see this many drones. Like, the funny thing was, the war zone originally was getting really excited to talk about how many drones that China has, and when the parade came out, no more articles on it, because I'm pretty sure they looked at it and they're like, okay, America doesn't have anything that looks like that, so let's just not talk about this.
I thought I was gonna give them a benefit of doubt. I thought maybe there are too many drones. They're gonna have to some time to process all that information. But that's what we have you here for, TP, to help us break it down.
Yeah, you can't hurt the feelings too much, so you just let's give them a little more time on that one.
All right. Are we do we have a wrap on drones and we can move on to the next
Yeah, I
next
think the
area?
submarines were really interesting too because like we've seen what the UUVs, unmanned underwater vehicles, so the drone submarine drones for a while now, and this was like the first time that we actually saw them displayed in parade, and they have these huge drones like that can they have the one that is supposed to be able to lay mines, and we had another one that's more like has a lot of sensors on there, and they're both pretty large, and so you'd imagine that they can stay in the water for a while. And when people ask what is so important about drones, this important part about drones is that um, you can build as many of them, and you don't have to worry about training the people to actually operate them, right? So there's no limitations in terms of finding enough people to be willing to spend days after days in the water and not having touch with their family. So this actually adds a lot of flexibility in how they can deploy like large number of these underwater vehicles around China. And I think the idea is like when you have enough of the underwater sensors and nodes, you have a much better situation awareness in the water. Against modern submarines, the best way to detect them is just having as many water sensors in the water in that area as possible, and then network them together so that once you do detect it, then you can pass along the information, and then you can send over the aircraft or the helicopter to actually attack them. So that's why, against the submarine threat, having a lot of underwater nodes is very important.
That reminds me. Do you think China took any lessons from the Ukraine war that's going on? Because the Ukraine war is like a real example of kind of the 21st century modern warfare that's being fought by near peer adversaries, right? And there were also a lot of autonomous units being used, like whether aerial drones or naval drones. Do you think China incorporate any lessons from the Ukraine war into their designs?
I think the most evident place where they took the Ukraine conflict into design is actually just looking at the ground forces changes that they displayed. The new Type 100 is pretty clearly developed or designed with the need to combat drone swarms in mind, because it's very much about like having a whole bunch of sensors, and it's no longer about the traditional armored combat. And I'm not too familiar with land warfare in general, but my view of how people did tanks in the back in the past is just basically having the best armor you can get and having the best round that you can use to penetrate the armor. Whereas now that you're facing the drone threat, what you actually need to be able to do is use information warfare to link together all the sensors so you can detect um, enemy drones, enemy artillery, or enemy armored vehicles from further out, and then attack them. And it might not be your own vehicle that attack them, right? Like it could be you detect a drone from a few kilometers out, then you direct it to the air defense unit FK-3000 with its micro missiles, and then it can attack the drones with it so that it doesn't get too close to your tank. Or your drone detects a tank from a little further out, then and then one of your armor vehicle can then send anti-tank missile over there to attack it. And if you look at the Chinese vehicles, it looks like they took the entire like EV revolution and put the military version of it out there, because they all have a lot of sensors around there, and they're all using hybrid technology, and so that they're all very quiet, and then they also can have lower heat signatures, and they all have like higher power generation capabilities. So all that power generation can supply the power needed for all the sensors, and in the future, if you want to add like lasers to them, you can. So that's kind of the interesting part. And you probably saw the humongous laser they had in the parade also. That thing looked really funny.
Yes, yes. Let's talk about the laser weapons. I'm curious about the laser weapons. Like those kind of things before you saw only in like James Bond or Austin Power movies. What are they? What do they do? What they're supposed to be designed for?
I think generally speaking, they're just supposed to be designed to for the Navy in this case, to probably shoot down incoming drones from like a certain distance out, or even, I think because the one that we saw in the parade was pretty large, it needs to be able to also shoot down anti-shipping missiles, so that it can provide a last line of defense against missiles attacking it. So first, you try to shoot it down with your longer range missiles. If you can't get it shot down, then you use your short range missiles. And if you still can't get it down, then you use the lasers at the end. So that's kind of the idea behind the lasers. And like they have the land warfare version also. Those are probably more to target just the drone swarms. And if you saw, they also have the microwave weapons, which they first showcased in the Zhuhai Air Show. And those can probably get the drones down from like, 2 kilometer out, and they can fry a bunch of them. And the laser is kind of interesting just because the technology behind it has really improved in the past couple of years. And a lot of that also is just driven by various new technologies that China is developing. The there's the laser communication that they're working on. There's the lidars that they work on, but a lot of it is really just using the right materials, using the right power generation, and and you're seeing that like in the weapon system that they tried it out, because you're able to efficiently utilize all this power and to actually accurately focus a beam and bring down targets. Like when you laser something with enough time, it will come down. That's kind of the idea.
Speaking of lasers, whatever happened to rail guns? Because I remember China was testing rail gun for a while, and then there then there's no more news coming out of that. And I think recently I saw Japan was also testing rail guns. Is that still ongoing? Is that still a thing, or did they just decide it's not? Oh no, it's not worth the effort.
My guess is that they probably still have the program ongoing, because they have enough bandwidth to pretty much work on every project that they want to. Like that's just when you have an overcapacity in engineers, you can just do that. And I think they probably didn't display it because it's just not ready to be displayed right now. Like a lot of the stuff that they displayed have been in service for a few years now, you know. So obviously, some of the stuff like the drones, they're relatively new, and we're not going to see them in large numbers until later. That those are just more to like showcase, China's current unmanned warfare prowess to the rest of the. Because you impress a lot of people with lasers, unmanned robotic looking stuff, right? So and but yeah, like I think it's still on. A lot of the other stuff is that you read about. They're probably still ongoing. They just haven't been able to put into production yet.
So what we saw in the parade is actually products that has been service that been in service in commission. They're not prototypes.
I think some of the drones are probably like they're technically in service, but they're still more of like a testing and evaluation phase. Like they're still trying to figure out how to use them. But most of the weapon system are actually, already in service. So, I don't really believe this stuff about them showcasing prototypes that don't work at the parade. I think most of it is actually in service.
Wow.
Yeah, like
Okay.
again, some of the more scientific stuff, they're probably still trying to figure out how to use it. So, it might take them a few years to figure out how to use it and decide if they want to mass produce it or not. But they are being evaluated somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, this is my argument for why the Pentagon 2027 deadline for China's quote unquote invasion of Taiwan is bogus, because China just need to wait until 2030. They will even have more firepower and more goodies. It's why 2027? That's just an arbitrary date. Um, Anything else? Any other areas you want to cover?
I mean, I think generally speaking, it was very impressive. Like even a lot of the stuff they displayed for the Air Force was kind of interesting, and um, they had their new generation of aircraft they always start off with the J-16D electronic warfare aircraft, followed by the J-20 and the J-20A and J-20S and the J-35A. It's kind of like showcasing we have these latest fifth generation aircraft along with these new electronic warfare aircraft that makes them pretty much invisible. And yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Actually, China also showcased some anti-ballistic missile systems. I was actually surprised to see that, because we know United States was a pioneer in the anti-ballistic missile program, but from what we saw in the 12-day Israel-Iran war, even Israel had the most advanced, most sophisticated layer ballistic defense. They had aircraft shooting down drones inside airspace of Serbia, inside airspace of Syria and Jordan, and then they have the THAAD system shooting down Iranian missiles, and they have Americans' Aegis system from U.S. Navy stationed in Mediterranean shooting down Iranian missiles. Then they have Israel's own Iron Dome and David Sling and all that, and Iranian missiles still find still enough of them made through and find their target. So missile defense is really, really hard to do, especially you are faced with a huge number of missiles. And but it looks like China is also investing in its own anti-ballistic missile defense. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think ballistic missile defense is generally very expensive, right? You're not going to get the right price ratios when you talk about offensive versus defensive because you need a better missile to intercept the missile that's coming over. So that's why it's always been hard. But when you have important assets in your navy to protect, um, and it could face ballistic missiles coming over, you just need to have some to protect your carrier groups. And I hope we never get to this, but if a war between China and India breaks out, and you have to worry about Indian nuclear weapons, for example, then you need to have some form of ballistic missile defense for your major cities to defend against those things.
I don't think there's gonna be that kind of war between China and India. But I get your point, but I don't
Yeah,
think
like my point
there
is you
will
need to
be.
protect the really important targets,
I agree.
which if you let, you know, hopefully we don't get to a situation where that happens but you're never going to intercept 100% of really good missiles. Like if you face really good missiles and there's enough of them coming over, you're just not going to intercept all of them. Like I'm sorry to tell people that, but you know, China is a big country also, right? Like you can't protect all the rural areas, so you need like these really good missiles to protect your important military assets and also your population centers and your industrial centers. Clearly, so they need that.
Anything else?
Yeah, like I just think it was very important to see like a lot of the technology come out. I mean, the laser stuff was very fascinating. The unmanned technology that they showcased was way beyond anything else that we've seen from other countries up to this point. The hypersonic missiles that we saw were like a couple generations ahead of everyone else, right? So they're very ahead in these areas, and the Air Force that they have currently is also probably the second largest in terms of size of fifth generation, and and doctrine wise, they're probably right up there with America in terms of fighting modern air warfare. And it's very important to think about this that an aircraft J-10C that they don't even care about, they don't even display in their own air show, was able to shoot down pretty much every Indian aircraft it came across. So like it was that just showcased how good these Chinese aircraft is in terms of um, sensor fusion and being able to fight modern warfare.
That reminds me, AWACS seems to be very important in the Chinese aerial combat doctrine. Even in the Pakistani-India conflict, AWACS play a role in relaying targets to the J-10C fighters, and we saw some, China displaced some of their own indigenous developed AWACS plane during the parade, right?
Yeah, I think we saw the KJ 600 definitely, and I think we saw the KJ 500 also. I don't remember if we saw the KJ 3000 or not, but the KJ 600 is kind of important just because you need it for the carrier groups, and if they were to eventually send the carrier group out, and they really need something like KJ 600 to do the command and control, to do the advanced early warning, and to do the electronic warfare and all that jazz. And another really important aircraft that they showcased was the J-15DT, which is the electronic warfare version of the J-15T. So it can be launched off the catapult, and the electronic warfare aircraft are very important. Like, the PLA has invested a lot of money into those things, and they're also very hard because you need to stick a lot of equipment inside them, and they still need to be able to take a fly off from a aircraft carrier. So that's why some of these projects has taken so long to be fully developed. And if you look at the parade, they always have the electronic warfare aircraft flying in the front that showcases ahead of the other fighters. That just showcases how highly they think of it.
I'm very impressed with how far China has come in the electronic warfare area, because I remember in the old days, like back in the 80s, 90s, 2000, what they did was they had these basically Soviet era airframes, and China was just trying to uh, stick in like Western electronic warfare system into them. But by now, I guess like China has its own indigenous electronic warfare system, right? I mean, they don't. I'm assuming they don't no longer rely on Western suppliers for their electronic warfare parts, right?
When you have the leading telecom provider in the world in Huawei, it makes all these radio frequency related applications, which is generally, what electronic warfare is. Basically, it's to um, disrupt the enemy communications and figuring out where they're from, and then trying to spoof them. That's like that is what telecom companies have to do themselves in all their development. So when you have entities like that, you have a huge supply chain which then you can build upon to develop modern electronic warfare equipment. So that's why they got so good at this stuff, and that's why, like, U.S. government was very anti-Huawei for so long.
That's a very good point. Wow, I think we cover a whole wide area of the weapons display on the parade. Did we miss anything? Is there any particular thing that you felt we need to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covers all the important ones.
All right. Well, thank you very much, TP, for coming to our show to explain about the latest advance of Chinese military as it was displayed during the latest victory parade. If people want to find you and follow your writings, where would they go?
Yeah, so you can find me at TP Huang on X or Twitter, or you can find me on Substack under TP Huang also. I post a
Oh,
lot on Twitter normally.
okay, so there you have it. Go subscribe to TP on both Twitter and Substack. He's a treasure trove of information on anything Chinese tech related. And thank you again, TP, for making the time to join us. And